Hello, fourth hour. Say I'm not here today and Mr. Honegraph is your sub. So I'm going to run you through the notes and then I'll briefly talk about your assignment. You'll have the rest of the time to complete it so you don't have any homework over the weekend. So remember, we're up here in Old English, and yesterday I had you do a brief writing assignment about who is this man and what elements of the painting led you to believe that. So at 10:20 this drop box closed. There's a number of in here, and for those of you that don't see your name up there, you do have more time, or you might have got it in before I shot this video this morning. So we're in Old English, and the next logical step here would be to take care of Beowulf 1. So your guided notes are here. Why don't you take a minute and download those. Okay, so normally I would have you share some of your responses for this video, but generally what happens is we get some answers like this guy was a warrior or a king, or perhaps some people say he's Jesus. Most people figure out that he is dead or he's some sort of statue or monument. But really there's no right or wrong answer at this point. I just wanted to have you look at that picture and see what elements led you to believe or make an inference about who that guy was. The actual name of it is Beowulf on the Funeral Pyre. And what is a funeral pyre? Well, back in the day, they would, when an important person died, instead of burying them in a coffin, they would actually cremate their body by setting it on fire. We see this throughout history. If you've ever seen the Star Wars films, Darth Vader's body's burned on a funeral pyre. If you've ever read or watched Troy or read the Iliad, you've seen funeral pyres there. But it was a pretty common way for not only these Anglo-Saxons, but also for some of the Greeks to pay respects for those important people. They burned their body, thereby cremating them. So what we're going to launch into now is Beowulf. And Beowulf is an epic. And an epic is a long narrative poem celebrating the deeds of a legendary or heroic figure. And it often focuses on some sort of national hero who performs these incredible feats. You've read epics before. In ninth grade you read the Odyssey, where Odysseus is trying to get home from the siege of Troy and that 10-year journey that gets him there. And more modern epics would be like Harry Potter, Star Wars, Aragon. There's a number of different epics that you do. Lord of the Rings would be another example. So even though they're not poems, they actually fit the epic cycle, the epic mode. And we'll talk more about that in the coming days. But they have the elements that make up an epic. They're just in movie form. This was originally told in Old English, which was the language spoken from 450 to 1066 in the Norman conquest. Like you saw in the video, it's also called the Anglo-Saxon language. Now you won't understand it if you heard it. It's very guttural sounding, Germanic sounding, but it was translated so that we can read through it. The text of Beowulf that we're going to launch into still survives. And you can see it. It's called the Beowulf Project if you go online, Project Gutenberg. And you can see it's in Old English, and what people like J.R.R. Tolkien, the guy who did Lord of the Rings, these guys were master Beowulf scholars. And when you read this, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you're going to see some of that transfer and some of the ideas that he brought out of it. So it's kind of cool if you ever want to look at it online. And some books that you get will have the Old English version on one side and we'll have the translated version on the other. But realize that it still survives. It's obviously in fairly rough shape. It's set in 6th century Scandinavia, which would be southern Sweden. Remember, there are no countries at the time, but that's where this tale is set. And basically, it's a story about a hall, a mead hall actually. And so back then, the richer lords would live in an estate. It would have a hall, a mead hall, surrounded by some outlying buildings. And there they would live and work and store things. But this mead hall was kind of the central location for all things in the community. Mead is an alcoholic beverage brewed with honey. So basically, they would get together in this mead hall, and they would drink, and they would have fires, and they would, sing songs, and you can see one here. Now, this is the setting of the story. Kind of the premise of the whole story, actually, is that we've got this big, wonderful mead hall, and its name is Harrod, and it's being terrorized by a monster, and the monster's name is Grendel. And a call is put out for somebody to come and help, And our hero, Beowulf, responds to this plea. As we begin reading it today, realize that it is difficult. It's a poem, so you can't just read it line by line. A growling monster, impatient day after day, his music laying. You got to read it. A monster was growling, impatient, as day after day the music rang loud in that hall, the harp's rejoicing song, etc. Read to the punctuation so that you're reading it as sentences, and that'll help it make sense. But when you fire it up today, you're going to notice a couple of things. Number one, it has a mix of pagan and Christian ideals. Remember that nobody could read or write back then. It was generally people that were clergy or somebody associated with the church. So more than likely, the story was told out loud over generations, and eventually some monk sat down and transcribed the text. Now, it was a pagan tale, but because they were trying to get people to convert to Christianity at the time, they would oftentimes interject Christianity into the story so that it was more accepted by the people that were reading or telling the story from, in generations after. Anglo-Saxons were pagans. Now, that doesn't mean they were atheists. They actually worshiped gods of nature, and they used their religion for material success. Eventually, though, Christianity was introduced, and you're going to see both pagan ideals and Christian ideals brought back. Right away, they're going to talk about like the monster Grendel, how evil he was, and he was a monster spawned of Cain and Abel. That's a biblical reference. So even though that was never in the original story, they'll talk about this monster, this pagan monster, and then they'll link it to this biblical story of Cain and Abel. And like I said, that was done on purpose by whoever transcribed the work and wrote it down for us. It's got three solid themes running through it, and they're really timeless themes that run through all epics, but it's the search to attain honor through deeds. It was what you did that made you great. And we'll talk more about fate and honor in the coming days. It's the importance of maintaining a civilized society, this basic battle between good and evil, and courage in the face of defeat. People that know that they're going to be in trouble, but they go and they do it anyway. So remember, Frodo Baggins knows he's going to die when he goes to throw the ring into Mordor, but he goes and he does it anyway. Luke Skywalker knows he's going to die when he goes to face his father, but he goes anyway. And even though they know they're going to be beaten, they still go ahead and fight the battle anyway. And that's kind of that one of those epic elements that comes into play. So what you're going to do today is you're going to start reading Beowulf. And it's going to be difficult and you're going to struggle, but I'm really not asking you to read the whole thing. What I'd like you to do is read pages 40 through 43. So you're going to download the PDF offline. And I want you to read the italics at the top. Now I want you to realize this is not the entire story of Beowulf. This is a portion of Beowulf, really a nice portion of Beowulf, but it's going to kind of throw you in just right towards the beginning of the story. Then I want you to, on a Google Doc, write the heading, write the Wrath of Grendel. And that's going to be the portion you're going to read today. It's only about 2.5 pages long, but you might need to reread it to figure out what's going on. When you get done, I want you to write a short paraphrase under the heading, The Wrath of Grendel. Okay, so you're going to basically, The Wrath of Grendel, and write a short paraphrase. A paraphrase is just in your own words, what did you read? If you're confused, if you struggle, turn to your neighbor. I don't care if your paraphrases are the same. It doesn't make any difference. You've got to do your own, but you will do a paraphrase for each section of Beowulf, and that's how you're going to get your daily points. Each paraphrase, I believe, is worth 3 points, and there's 7 or 8 of them. So that's a running assignment that we're going to use throughout Beowulf. When you get done reading that, I want you to go back to the very first page. And I want you to look at the description of Heorot. Now remember, Heorot is our mead hall. And then I want you to read the description below it of the dwelling of the monster Grendel. Why do you think the storyteller juxtaposes these scenes? Basically, I want you in a short paragraph to say, why did he place this really nice place by this really bad place? Okay, and that's juxtaposition. What purpose does it do? What does it do for the reader to have those two unlike places stacked on top of each other that we read? So you're going to find the description of Heorot on page 40, the very first page. And again, I want you to think through it. What does it do for us? And there's more than one answer. Again, if you struggle with this, please turn to your neighbor, have a discussion about it, and add it right below that paraphrase. Just call it juxtaposition paragraph. So really what I'm looking for Monday is you have got a Google Doc open. It's called, you've got a heading called The Wrath of Grendel. Underneath it, a paraphrase of the 2 pages that you read. And below that, a short juxtaposition paragraph that kind of outlines what goes on. So, on Monday when you get here, we're going to talk about that paragraph. We're going to review your paraphrase, and we're going to take a short 3-point Beowulf quiz. Not too difficult. If you read it and you talked about it with your neighbors and you wrote a paraphrase, you'll be fine on the short quiz. I will see you on Monday. If you struggle with this, it's not a big deal. We'll get you all straightened back out. I will be back on Monday to get you caught up. See you then.